Greetings, philosophers. Let's continue. Where were we? 67. Oh, yeah. We're talking about slaves. Oh, boy. How about reflecting that the person you call your slave traces his origin back to the same stock as yourself, has the same good sky above him, breathes as you do, lives as you do, dies as you do? It is as easy for you to see in him a free-born man as for him to see a slave in you. Remember the Varus disaster. Many a man of the most distinguished ancestry who was doing his military service as the first step on the road to a seat in the Senate was brought low by fortune, condemned by her to look after a steading, for example, or a flock of sheep. Now think contemptuously of these people's lot in life, in whose very place, for all your contempt, you could suddenly find yourself. I don't want to involve myself in an endless topic of debate by discussing the treatment of slaves, towards whom we Romans are exceptionally arrogant, harsh, and insulting. But the essence of the advice I'd like to give is this: treat your inferiors in the way in which you would like to be treated by your own superiors. And whenever it strikes you how much power you have over your slave, let it also strike you that your own master has just as much power over you. Quote, I haven't got a master, you say. You're young yet. There's always the chance that you'll have one. Have you forgotten the age at which Hecuba became a slave, or Croesus, or the mother of Darius, or Plato, or Diogenes? Be kind and courteous in your dealings with a slave. Bring him into your discussions and conversations and your company generally. And if at this point all those people who have been spoilt by luxury raise an outcry protesting, as they will, quote, there couldn't be anything more degrading, anything more disgraceful, let me just say that these are the very persons I will catch on occasion kissing the hand of someone else's slave. Don't you notice, too, how our ancestors took away all odium from the master's position, and all that seemed insulting or degrading in the lot of the slave, by calling the master, quote, father of the household, and speaking of the slaves as, quote, members of the household, something which survives to this day in the mime. They instituted, too, a holiday on which master and slave were to eat together, not as the only day this can happen, of course, but as one on which it was always to happen. And in the household they allowed the slaves to hold official positions, and to exercise some jurisdiction in it. In fact, they regarded the household as a miniature republic. Quote, do you mean to say, comes the retort, that I'm to have each and every one of my slaves sitting at the table with me? Not at all, any more than you're to invite to it everybody who isn't a slave. You're quite mistaken, though, if you imagine that I'd bar from the table certain slaves on the grounds of the relatively menial or dirty nature of their work. That muleteer, for example, or that cowhand. I propose to value them according to their character, not their jobs. Each man has a character of his own choosing. It is chance or fate that decides his choice of job. Have some of them dine with you because they deserve it, others in order to make them so deserving. For if there's anything typical of the slave about them, as a result of the low company they're used to living in, it will be rubbed off through association with men of better breeding. You needn't, my dear Lucilius, look for friends only in the city or the Senate. If you keep your eyes open, you'll find them in your own home. Good material often lies idle for want of someone to make use of it. Just give it a trial. A man who examines the saddle and bridle and not the animal itself when he is out to buy a horse is a fool. Similarly, only an absolute fool values a man according to his clothes, or according to his social position, which, after all, is only something that we wear, like clothing. He's a slave, you say, but he may have the spirit of a free man. He's a slave, but is that really to count against him? Show me a man who isn't a slave. One is a slave to sex, another to money, another to ambition. All are slaves to hope or fear. I could show you a man who has been a consul who is a slave to his little old woman. A millionaire who is the slave of a little girl in domestic service. I could show you some highly aristocratic young men who are utter slaves to stage artistes. And there's no state of slavery more disgraceful than one which is self-imposed. So you needn't allow yourself to be deterred by the snobbish people I've been talking about from showing good humor toward your slaves, instead of adopting an attitude of arrogant superiority towards them. Have them respect you rather than fear you. Here, just because I've said they, quote, should respect a master rather than fear him, end quote, someone will tell us that I'm now inviting slaves to proclaim their freedom and bringing about their employer's overthrow. Are slaves to pay their respects like dependent followers or early morning callers? That's what he means, I suppose, they say. Anyone saying this forgets that what is enough for a god, in the shape of worship, cannot be too little for a master. To be really respected is to be loved, and love and fear will not mix. That's why I think you're absolutely right in not wishing to be feared by your slaves, and in confining your lashings to verbal ones. As instruments of correction, beatings are for animals only. Besides, what annoys us does not necessarily do us any harm, but we masters are apt to be robbed of our senses by mere passing fancies, to the point where our anger is called out by anything which fails to answer to our will. We assume the mental attitudes of tyrants, for they too forget their own strength and the helplessness of others, and grow white-hot with fury as if they had received an injury, when all the time they are quite immune from any such danger through the sheer exaltedness of their position. Nor indeed are they unaware of this, but it does not stop them seizing an opportunity of finding fault with an inferior or maltreating him for it. They receive an injury by way of excuse to do one themselves. But I won't keep you any longer. You don't need exhortation. It is a mark of a good way of life that, among other things, it satisfies and abides. Bad behavior, constantly changing, not for the better, simply into different forms, has none of this stability. Letter 68. I shall reply later to the letter you sent me while you were on your journey. It was as long as the journey itself. I must first take myself aside and deliberate what advice I should give. For you yourself, before consulting me as you are doing, gave long thought to the question whether you should consult me at all. So I ought to be giving this question of advice far longer thought on the principle that it takes you more time to solve a problem than to set it. Particularly when one course is to your interest and another to mine. Or does this make me sound like an Epicurean again? No, if a thing is in your interest, it is also in my own interest. Otherwise, if any matter that affects you is of no concern of mine, I'm not a friend. Friendship creates a community of interest between us in everything. We have neither successes nor setbacks as individuals. Our lives have a common end. No one can lead a happy life if he thinks only of himself and turns everything to his own purposes. You should live for the other person if you wish to live for yourself. The assiduous and scrupulous cultivation of this bond, which leads to our associating with our fellow men and believes in the existence of a common law for all mankind, contributes more than anything else to the maintenance of that more intimate bond I was mentioning, friendship. A person who shares much with a fellow human being will share everything with a friend. What I should like those subtle thinkers, you know the ones I mean, my peerless Lucilius, to teach me is this, what my duties are to a friend and to a man, rather than the number of senses in which the expression friend is used, and how many different meanings the word man has. Before my very eyes, wisdom and folly are taking their separate stands. Which I shall join? Whose side am I to follow? For one person, man is equivalent to friend. For another, man and friend are far from being identified, and in making a friend, one man will be seeing an asset, while another will be making himself an asset to the other. And in the midst of all this, what you people do for me is pull words about and cut up syllables. One is led to believe that unless one has constructed syllogisms of the craftiest kind, and reduced fallacies to a compact form in which a false conclusion is derived from a true premise, one will not be in a position to distinguish what one should aim at and what one should avoid. It makes one ashamed that men of our advanced years should turn a thing as serious as this into a game. Quote, "Mouse is a syllable, and a mouse nibbles cheese. Therefore, a syllable nibbles cheese." End quote. Suppose for the moment I can't detect the fallacy in that. What danger am I placed in by such lack of insight? What serious consequences are there in it for me? What have I to fear, no doubt, is the possibility one of these days of my catching a syllable in a mousetrap, or even having my cheese eaten up by a book if I'm not careful. Unless, perhaps, the following train of logic is a more acute one. Mouse is a syllable, and a syllable does not nibble cheese. Therefore, a mouse does not nibble cheese. What childish fatuities these are! Is this what we philosophers acquire wrinkles in our brows for? Is this what we let our beards grow long for? Is this what we teach with faces grave and pale? You know what this reminds me of? Something I've been studying lately to make a rebuttal on. Let me look at my notes, find an example. This reminds me of Mark Passio's proof of natural law based in these sort of word equivocations. All right, well, I don't want to spend too much time reading my notes just to give you an example on this, but let's move on. Shall I tell you what philosophy holds out to humanity? Counsel. One person is facing death, another is vexed by poverty, while another is tormented by wealth. Whether his own or someone else's, one man is appalled by his misfortune, while another longs to get away from his own prosperity. One man is suffering at the hands of men, another at the hands of the gods. What's the point of concocting whimsies for me of the sort I've just been mentioning? This isn't the place for fun. You're called in to help the unhappy. You're pledged to bring succor to the shipwrecked, to those in captivity, to the sick, the needy, and men who are just placing their heads beneath the executioner's uplifted axe. Where are you off to? What are you about? The person you're engaging in wordplay with is in fear. Go to his aid. All mankind are stretching out their hands to you on every side. Lives that have been ruined, lives that are on the way to ruin are appealing for some help. It is to you that they look for hope and assistance. They are begging you to extricate them from this awful vortex, to show them in their doubt and disarray the shining torch of truth. Tell them what nature has made necessary and what she has made superfluous. Tell them how simple are the laws she has laid down, and how straightforward and enjoyable life is for those who follow them, and how confused and disagreeable it is for others who put more trust in popular ideas than they do in nature. All right, if you can point out to me where those puzzles are likely to bring people such relief. Which of them removes cravings or brings them under control? If only they were simply unhelpful. They're actually harmful. I'll give you the clearest proof, whenever you like, of their tendency to weaken and enfeeble even eminent talents once applied to such quibbles. And when it comes to saying how they equip people proposing to do battle with fortune, and what weapons they offer them, one hangs one's head with shame. Is this the way to our supreme ideal? Do we get there by means of all that, quote, if X, Y, or if not Y, Z, one finds in philosophy? And by means of quibbles that would be shameful and discreditable, even among persons occupying themselves with law reports? When you're leading the person you're questioning into a trap, aren't you just making it look as if he has lost his case on a purely technical point of pleading? The praetor's court, however, restores litigants losing in this way to their rightful position, and philosophy does the same for people thus questioned. Why do philosophers like you abandon the magnificent promises you have made, after assuring me in solemn terms that you will see to it that my eyes shall no more be overwhelmed by the glitter of gold than by the glitter of a sword, that I shall spurn with magnificent strength of purpose the things all other men pray for and the things all other men are afraid of? Why do you have to descend to the schoolroom ABC? What do you say? Quote, is this the way to the heavens? End quote. For that is what philosophy has promised me, that she will make me God's equal. That's the invitation, and that's what I've come for. Be as good as your word. Keep clear then, my dear Lucilius, as far as you can, of the sort of quibbles and qualifications I've been mentioning in philosophers. Straightforwardness and simplicity are in keeping with goodness. Even if you had a large part of your life remaining before you, you would have to organize it very economically to have enough for all the things that are necessary. As things are, isn't it the height of folly to learn inessential things when time's so desperately short? You know, that's another reminder from yet another angle about one of the core Stoic tenets, which is memento mori, remember death. And, you know, I think when I was in the middle of reading Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's work. I think I got a little tired of it because it was just repeated on every page. But now that I've had a break, it's refreshing to be reminded. I've already started to forget to remind myself. It's weird. Like, it's just not something that we do every day to remind ourselves that, hey, this is one of my remaining days. Let's use it well. And in this case, he's saying, hey, you're not going to live forever. You can't learn everything. So if you're going to spend time learning, don't learn a bunch of nonsense. Learn some stuff that's going to be useful, because you're not going to be around forever. So prioritize what you're going to spend time learning. I like it. All right, guys. Have a great day.